Have you ever stopped to think about how people actually end up in their careers? I mean, not the big 5-year plans, but those, almost accidental ways people find themselves in really specific fields. It's something I find fascinating, how a simple need, like needing a job, can sometimes open up this window onto a much bigger, more complex system. So today, that's exactly what we're doing, a deep dive into how people get into higher education teaching. We've got this really interesting excerpt from an interview. It's about one person's journey getting into HE teaching in the UK, specifically around 2010. So our mission, let's pull out those nuggets of knowledge from his story.
Absolutely. And it's often these individual stories that really shine a light, isn't it? You follow one person's path and suddenly you start seeing these broader trends or, structural things happening within a whole sector. So this deep dive, it's going to reveal a pretty specific, maybe less talked about part of the UK's higher education scene back then.
Okay, let's dive straight into the story then, John's story. What jumped at me right away, and I think, a lot of you listening might find this familiar, is how upfront he was.
Yeah.
He basically said he got into HE teaching because, well, quote, he needed a job, really.
Yeah, straightforward.
It's just such a common starting point, isn't it?
Yeah.
So relatable. It's not always some grand calling. Sometimes it's just, practical necessity getting the ball rolling.
Right.
Now, the source tells us a bit about his background. He wasn't completely new to teaching, but new to HE. He'd been working abroad.
Right.
And teaching teenagers and below, mostly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he had experience, but in a pretty different world, different age group, which kind of sets up a nice contrast for where he landed next.
And what's really fascinating there, I think, is how that meeting a job connected with what he could already do.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't just random. The source makes it clear he did have some academic qualifications and skills. That's crucial.
Ah, okay. So it wasn't just desperation. There was a foundation there.
Exactly. It wasn't like he was starting from absolute zero. That need, that practical driver, it met this existing skill set, this academic background. And that's what seems to have opened this specific door into HE, rather than, say, something completely different. It's that mix of need and capability.
That's a really good point, how need meets opportunity, but opportunity shaped by skills.
Mm-hmm.
So John's back in the UK. The source pins it down in about 2010. And you mentioned this earlier, that timing. It feels important.
Oh, definitely. 2010 is a key marker for understanding what was happening in UK higher education at the time. Lots of changes were brewing or already underway.
And where did he land the job? Not directly in a university, interestingly. It says at a private education company.
Yes. And that detail, private education company, combined with the year 2010, is really significant.
Okay, tell us more. Why is that combination so key?
Well, around 2010, the UK HE landscape was, let's say, dynamic, policy shifts, funding changes, a big push on attracting international students. And alongside the traditional universities, you had this growing number of these private providers. They were often maybe more agile, quicker to spot and fill specific gaps in the market.
Gaps that the bigger universities maybe weren't addressing as quickly.
Potentially, yes, or addressing in a different way. So
Yeah.
John landing there immediately signals we're looking at a more commercially responsive part of the education sector that was definitely gaining traction.
Right, and John himself noticed this wasn't just a one-off company. He actually observed, according to the source, that there were becoming quite a few of these private education companies at the time, which really underlines your point. It wasn't an isolated thing. It suggests the whole sector was kind of booming, or at least expanding significantly, a real trend.
Precisely. It points to a growing demand being met by these newer private players.
So what exactly were these companies doing? What was their main offering?
Okay, so John calls them specialized pathway and foundation programs.
Pathway and foundation. What does that mean in practice?
Think of them as preparatory courses. They weren't full degrees themselves. They were designed to bridge a gap. They focused on getting students ready for university, study things like academic skills, boosting English proficiency if needed, maybe some subject-specific groundwork.
So like a structured stepping stone.
Exactly, a bridge. Creating a supported path for students who maybe didn't quite meet the direct entry requirements for a university degree straight off, or perhaps just needed time to adjust academically.
Okay, that makes sense. A specific kind of preparation. And who were these programs primarily aimed at? Was there a particular group?
Yes, and John is very clear on this. He says they were for international students.
Ah, okay. International students.
Which makes a lot of sense when you think about it. International students often come from different educational backgrounds, different systems.
Different expectations, maybe.
Definitely. Different expectations, different ways subjects are taught. And even if their English is good, there's still the hurdle of academic language and, the whole culture of a UK
Oh,
university.
right. It's not just about language fluency, it's academic culture, too.
Exactly. So these pathway programs were specifically tailored to help smooth that transition, to make sure these students were really ready academically, linguistically, culturally for a full UK degree.
So these private companies are running these preparatory programs for international students. What then? What was the end goal? Where did the students go afterwards?
The goal, the source tells us, was to prepare them for degrees at partner universities.
Partner universities. So there's a direct link.
Absolutely, a very important connection. These private companies weren't operating in isolation. They had formal partnerships with established universities.
So they were like feeders, funneling students through.
In a way, yes. They were part of a pipeline. They identified, recruited, prepared, and then channeled these international students into degree programs at their partner institutions. It shows us a really significant route for how international students were accessing UK degrees around 2010. It wasn't always the sort of traditional direct application route.
Huh. So this pathway model was a major entry mechanism.
It certainly seems to have been a growing and important one. It provided this intermediate stage, validating student readiness and arguably expanding access for universities keen to recruit internationally. It was a system adapting to global demand.
Okay, so let's try and pull this together then. John's story, it starts with a very relatable, practical need getting a job.
Mm-hmm.
That need leads him, around 2010, into this expanding sector in the UK, private education companies.
Right.
And these companies had carved out a niche, offering these specialized pathway and foundation programs
Yes, specifically designed.
specifically for international students, with the clear aim of preparing them to then move on to degree programs at partner universities.
Exactly. So what John's personal journey really does is it throws a spotlight on this whole significant segment of the HE system that was evolving at the time. His story isn't just about him finding a job. It's a window onto this infrastructure being built, specifically to manage and facilitate international student entry.
It really shows how these private companies became key connectors, didn't they?
Absolutely. They were providing a specific structured route into UK universities for international students, maybe one that felt more accessible or tailored than just applying direct. It illuminates a really interesting dynamic in the HE landscape of that period.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? When you understand these specific mechanisms like these private pathway programs popping up for international students back then, how does that change how you think about access to higher education or diversity within it? Or even just the business side of universities? It definitely adds another layer to the conversation.
Imagine you're aiming for a top university degree. You think, okay, it's all about grades, hard work, right? That academic merit is the key. But what if there's another way in? A path that isn't discussed quite as much, maybe, where, well, money could open a different kind of door. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on something pretty interesting, maybe a bit controversial, in international education. We're diving into these things called pathway programs in the UK. They sort of promise a route into good universities for students who, might not meet the usual entry requirements straight off. And, well, it looks like a system where money can sometimes reshape the rules of the game.
It really does seem that way.
Yeah.
Our deep dive today leans heavily on the experiences of someone we're calling John. He actually worked inside this system. And he described it as a place where, well, money talks pretty directly. You've got these private education companies acting as powerful intermediaries, gatekeepers almost, helping students get into UK universities. So we're going to unpack how that works exactly and what it might mean.
Yeah, and these aren't small outfits we're talking about, are they? These intermediaries. We're looking at big names in Private Education Study Group, INTO, Kaplan, Navitas, Cambridge Education Group, names like that.
Major players.
Yeah.
They offer these gateway programs to, well, thousands of international students each year.
So the big question for us is, how does this middleman setup actually, change things in higher education? Let's really dig into what John saw.
Now, for most people, getting into university seems straightforward, doesn't it? You apply, they look at your grades. If you make the cut, great. If not, Well, you don't get in. Or you have to work harder, retake things. That's the usual thinking. That's the ideal, yes, the standard path. But what John's experience reveals, and what the sources suggest, is how global money flows and the sheer desire for these prestigious UK degrees creates, well, other ways in, pathways that kind of bypass those initial academic hurdles. And these private education companies, they don't just offer an alternative. They actively create and manage these parallel routes. And the why is interesting, too. UK universities, they've had funding pressures, haven't they? They need diverse income streams.
Right. International students pay much higher fees.
Exactly. So they're a crucial source of income. These pathway providers offer a way for universities to access that market, sometimes without needing to, officially lower their advertised entry standards for direct applicants.
Ah, okay. So it's strategic for the universities, too, not just a service for students. It helps their bottom line and maybe boost their international numbers. John, being inside, must have seen this clash between maybe academic ideals and financial realities pretty clearly. What really stood out to him?
Absolutely. Imagine him starting out expecting it all to be about academic merit and then quickly seeing this powerful financial engine running alongside it. He saw these private companies acting as the go-betweens, making, as he put it, an enormous amount of cash. And a big chunk of that cash gets shared back with the partner universities. It's a deal.
A clear financial incentive for everyone involved then.
Definitely. The private colleges get students who need the pathway, and the universities get a share of the revenue, plus the students enrolling later. It makes what looks like an academic decision into, well, partly an economic one. Almost like a pre-agreed pipeline for fee-paying students.
And John did mention, didn't he, that before COVID, many of these students, often from places like Arab countries and China, were actually really hardworking.
Yes, he stressed that. It wasn't about them being lazy or anything. It might have been differences in their previous education system, or just not quite hitting the very specific, sometimes very high UK entry bars.
So for many, it's a genuine drive to get that UK education.
Absolutely. It highlights that the motive often isn't just finding an easy route. It's about overcoming barriers made from their home system or targeting a specific top UK university they couldn't get into directly. For these students, these programs are a real chance to reach their goals, even if it costs a lot.
Okay, let's make this concrete. Can we walk through an example, maybe like the one John described with a student from China? How does it actually work, step by step?
Yeah, it's a very clear process, almost like a contract. So imagine a student from China. Their high school grades are okay, maybe good there, but just not quite enough for direct entry into the UK university program they want. So instead of, say, spending years retaking exams, they contact one of these private colleges.
Like Kaplan or Institute?
Exactly. The college then offers them a place. Now, this isn't at the university yet. It's a guaranteed place at one of maybe 5 or 6 specific partner universities, but only after they complete the college's program. And here's the core of it. The student agrees to study full-time, but at the private college, not the university. This is the pathway program.
So like a foundation year or something similar?
Sort of, yeah. Often a year, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on how far off the entry standard they were initially. It's designed to get them ready academically, language-wise, and the cost, this is key. The student pays the private college directly. We're talking about the equivalent of a full year's university tuition, roughly £18,000 a year.
£18,000, wow. Paid to the college, not the uni.
Right. It covers their teaching, the prep, everything at the college. Then, assuming they pass the pathway program, and John suggested the bar for passing wasn't always incredibly high, then the partner university accepts them. And as part of the deal, the university gets a payment from the private college. It's all quite structured, financially driven.
£18,000. That's a huge amount.
You'd hope the academic prep is top-notch for that. But John felt this whole process essentially let students bypass the usual academic gatekeeping, didn't he? It shows how money can become a different kind of qualification. Precisely. That was the eye-opener for him. Seeing students successfully navigate into university programs mainly because they or their families could afford this middleman fee. Access to a degree mediated not just by grades, but significantly by this financial transaction, often with that guaranteed progression tagged on.
So, stepping back, connecting the dots. This system effectively creates an alternative route for certain international students, one where ability to pay interacts very strongly with academic entry.
Yes, it bypasses the need to meet the standard direct entry requirements up front, replacing it with completion of this paid preparatory program run by a private company.
Now, people who support these programs, they'd argue it's good for internationalization, right? Brings in diversity, different perspectives.
Exactly. And vital income for universities, which they can argue benefits everyone funding research facilities.
Yeah.
They also say it ensures students are prepared before starting the main degree, filling any gaps.
That's a fair point. But then, the flip side, what does it mean for the value of that degree? If entry, for some, seems almost purchasable, does it risk diluting the university's academic reputation even slightly? It really makes you question the fairness and the standards when there's such a clear financial element involved in getting in.
It really does. That's the core tension, isn't it?
Yeah.
The university's need for income versus maintaining academic standards rigorously across the board. When a decent chunk of your international intake arrives via a route with guaranteed progression after a paid course, well, it invites questions. Are the standards genuinely equivalent? Is the education in that private pathway college always robust enough for a demanding degree? Or does the financial incentive become the main driver? And again, this isn't blaming the students, they're just using the system available. It's about looking critically at the incentives these partnerships create for the institutions.
And this wasn't the end of the story for John either. He moved on and saw something he felt was, well, even more problematic.
Yeah, he described a situation later at another private college as much worse. It suggests this pay-to-access idea exists on a spectrum. While the pathways we focused on are about bridging an academic gap, what he saw later sounded disturbingly close to pay to graduate.
He mentioned students paying around £16,000 for a master's, showing up for 32 weeks, but barely engaging. Phones out, using AI for assignments, that sounds like a very different level of issue,
Right.
where the academic side seems almost absent.
It does point towards a potentially stark evolution, yeah, where the transaction itself might overshadow any real academic effort or learning. It's definitely something concerning and worth exploring perhaps another time.
For sure, it shows how these models can shift, really pushing the boundaries.
Absolutely. The pathway is one thing, but this later observation hints at where things could go in some corners of the system.
So wrapping this up for today, what's the main takeaway? Our deep dive shows this really powerful financial current running through UK higher education admissions for international students. Those traditional Gates grades, academic merit, they can sometimes be navigated differently through these pathway programs run by private companies acting as lucrative bridges.
Right. It's a system built on financial partnerships and that huge global demand for UK degrees. It offers opportunities, definitely, but it also throws up some big questions. And it really pushes us to think about the long-term effects. What does this mean for academic standards globally? For the actual integrity of degrees, for how fair the whole system seems when access can essentially be bought via these intermediaries. It makes you consider the true cost, beyond just the tuition fee, the cost perhaps to academic rigor, to consistency, maybe even to the degree's value worldwide. It's complex. It challenges how we think about achieving success in university.
Definitely food for thought. We encourage you to think about how these insights might shift your view of international education and getting those sought-after degrees. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.